Robot Dog Drums has been out for a week now, and the feedback has been amazing. Of course, everyone loves the sounds, but one thing I keep on hearing about is the interface, how everything you need is right where you need it, and everything does exactly what you'd expect it to. That said, let's do a little video going through the entire interface, showing exactly what everything does. So here's what it looks like, and if you don't know what it sounds like this. Alright, so it's a Kontakt sample library. It runs in Native Instruments Kontakt or Kontakt Player, which is totally free. It runs standalone or as a plugin in your DAW. If you've just opened up Kontakt, it would look more like this. You have your library over here. Find Robot Dog Drums. Double click there. I'm just going to make the window a little smaller like that so we can focus on the Robot Dog Drums interface. If you hit this little info icon right here, Kontakt always defaults to MIDI channel 1A or port A, channel 1, whatever that means. But a lot of drum modules are defaulted to channel 10. So you're not going to hear anything coming through the plugin unless you put this on 10. What I like to do is just put this on Omni. That means it'll pick up MIDI from any channel. All right, so let's go back to the snapshot panel. There we go. There's our snapshot right here that we're currently on. That's the first one, alternative metal. Here's the list of snapshots right here. You can quickly audition them by clicking these left and right arrows. Anyway, we'll go back to alternative metal. All right, looking at the interface, I'm just going to go through everything here. If you click on the logo, you get a little behind the scenes information created by myself, dedicated to my amazing 14-year-old puppy, Robot, and then a few of the amazing people that helped to make this possible. First up is the character control. It's one of the biggest points of differentiation of this plugin. It's unmixed to mixed control that really works. It's really obvious what you're hearing. Let me just turn it up and down real quickly for you. All right, yeah, there's a huge variety of tones just in that one control alone. All right, right below that is the punch button. It's basically an overall transient modulator that just increases the attack of the drums overall. Below that, you have the panel buttons for navigating between the different panels in the plugin. I guess first of all, let's look at the kit. You can click on any of the drums or cymbals to hear a preview. And also when you click on those drums or cymbals, it brings that drum or cymbal up in this menu here. You can also select through like this, or you can click up and down, goes through them all. Let's click on the snare. One thing to know on the snare is the center of the drum is the snare sound. The side of the drum is the rim shot sound. And then the rim of the snare drum is the side stick sound. All right, so let's make that snare drum active. Now you can choose which snare drum you want to use from this menu. So you have your whole list of different snare drums here. And one thing I like to do is to play a track or play a MIDI loop, and then click these up and down arrows to audition different drums. That was a feature request we added in testing. Pretty cool. All right, right below that is a snare on and off switch. Click that, and now you have a snare off sound. Every single snare drum has snare on and off sounds. right, moving along. When you have selected a drum or cymbal, comes up there, and then this is the MIDI note currently assigned to that drum or cymbal. If you have a drum pad or a keyboard or a controller, just hit learn and then hit your pad or keyboard or controller and it will learn which MIDI note that is. Same thing over here. There are two of these slots mainly for electronic drum pads that have multiple zones on one pad, and you want to assign the same sound to multiple zones on the same pad. There's more info on that on our electronic kit setup video, which I will link to in the description. Next, we have a tuning control right here. It's a little tuning fork, and this works for any of the drums. You have this really low drum, we can tune it up high. Or make it even way lower. Pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to put that back to the default setting, and if you hit Command on Mac or Control on PC and then click, any function goes back to its default setting. All right, that's about it for the kit page. You just have these fun little percussion instruments over there. That's about it. Let's move on to the mixer page. Now on the mixer page, you have a basic mixer with channel strips for each of the kit components. And this works pretty much like you'd expect any mixer to. You've got volume faders, you've got pan knobs, got mute and solo. If you have multiple things soloed and you want to clear those out, hit Command on Mac or Control on PC and click, zeroes them out. And then you have a couple extra things. On kick drum, you have this 808 knob. Let's solo that. It's basically a one-shot trigger sound that you can blend in. Snare drum has the same thing. It's over here. It's called trigger. One thing to know on all of these little controls and the reverb and many of the other controls on this mixer page is you can click on the name of the control and it will disable it or bypass it entirely. Next we have the room control on the kick and snare, and that controls how much room sound is sent to the room channel of the mixer. So let's play that and we'll crank up the room sound on the snare drum. So you're getting more room from the snare drum in the room channel. It sounds like reverb, but it's not reverb. It's just pumping up the room sound of the snare drum. Reverb is right here. Can adjust that. It's a nice crunchy algorithmic reverb. Speaking of reverb, the reverb time control is right down here on the lower right. Moving along through the channel strips, you have the output menu right here. So each of these can be assigned to a different output in Contact. One thing to note is that reverb is always going to come out on the first stereo output. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way Contact works. So in general, I like to, if I'm going to bus everything out to multiple outputs, I leave the first stereo output for reverb and I start with the second stereo output for kick, third for snare, and so on. Let's just put the presets back to stereo. Speaking of which, that's the output preset menu down in the lower right. You can choose from stereo, which everything is on stereo 1 and 2, or multi-min, which is just a basic kick, snare, and then toms are on one stereo channel, hi-hat and ride and cymbals are on another, room is on another. And if you really want to bus everything out completely, you can use multi-max. That puts each of the 5 toms on separate outputs, hi-hat, ride, separate outputs, and the cymbals on separate outputs, and so on. Let's put it back to stereo, because that's generally how I use the plugin. All right, so getting back to a few other things, you have reverb control on the toms, and you notice you turn one and all the rest turn. That's because the reverb is linked down here in the lower right. You can also link the reverb controls for cymbals. Next thing to know is over here in the room channel strip, you can control the amount of toms and cymbals in the room as well, just like the kick and snare is up here. Toms and cymbals are all together. It would have been tedious if you had to adjust the room level of each tom or each cymbal. They're all in one here. You're not going to generally want to crank up or down one tom in the room channel compared to another, or one cymbal compared to another. So they're all ganged up right here. Toms and cymbals in the room channel. Speaking of which, there's the room size control right here, and we'll play it, and actually we'll just solo the room, and we'll turn this up and down. You control the size of the room. So all the way down is a really, really tight, small room sound. All the way up is a lot bigger. So let's put it on default. One thing I forgot to mention is you can click on the name of any track to addition that drum or cymbal. Kind of convenient. All right, so now we get into the master effects section. So there's a bleed control if you want to insert some bleed between the drums into the different tracks. And of course I gang this all up on one knob just to make it easy. With it all the way down or bypass, there's no bleed, everything's completely isolated, or you can start adding more and more bleed into it with that control. There's a master reverb control right here. Master compression overall, and master saturation, and then a tape saturation on and off button right here. And one neat thing about this plugin is these master effects apply to every track, even if you bust the tracks out to different outputs. So that brings me to a note about multi-outs on this. If you really, really want to mix the plugin yourself using multi-outs with no processing, the way you would do that is to, let's say, use the output preset multi-max. That gets everything on different channels. Turn the character control all the way down. Turn the punch button off. And then this is the extra step of you want to just bypass each of these master controls. We don't need any reverb. Don't need any compression. Don't need any saturation. Don't need tape saturation. All right, now you have completely dry, raw samples that you can mix from scratch. All right, let's roll everything back to where we were. We'll just pull up alternative metal again. Okay, everything's back. All right, I think that brings us to the setup panel. On the setup page, the first basic thing you can do is to choose a setup preset. The RDD default setting is based on General MIDI, so it's pretty compatible with a lot of drum loops and a lot of different drum plugins. If you wanted to clear all the mappings and start from scratch, you can click on Clear All Mappings. Let's put it back to RDD default. This is also where you would select a preset if you have a Roland brand E-kit, or you're coming from Superior Drummer, Get Good Drums, Steven Slate Drums, Addictive Drums, or if you want to load or save your own custom settings to disk. As we test Robot Dog drums on different electronic drum kits and have different requests for other presets, these will be added in a future update. Right here you have all the drums and cymbals, and you can audition them by clicking on their names. And you have similar controls to the kit page. You can choose the MIDI note, or you can hit learn and then hit a key or a pad on your MIDI controller, and it will assign that note to the drum or cymbal. So right here in the snare section, let's get into some of the specific things with snare. There's this option, hardest hits played as rim shots. That'll automatically map any snare hits that are 110 or higher velocity. It will turn them into rim shots, so they're a much stronger sounding hit. It's a pretty convenient thing to do when you're programming, so you don't have to bounce between snare and rim shot on your piano roll. Then there's E-kit positional sensing. If you have a Roland or compatible module with positional sensing on the snare, you can turn that on. Then here are some adjustments for that. I get into that more in the E-kit setup video, but basically you can control where the different zones of the center and the edge and everything in between lands on your drum the way it's configured, so you can really fine tune it to your preference. Moving down from there, you have more and more drums. You get into the toms, and there's this little disclosure triangle next to each tom. You can hit that, and in that way you can get into the tom rim and tom rim shot sounds. You have those for each tom. All right, the rest are pretty self-explanatory until you get to the E-kit hi-hat setup area over here. So if you're using an electronic kit with a hi-hat controller, you'll want to map the tip and the edge of the pad to these two slots right here. The CC number of the pedal controller can be adjusted right here. If you don't know what that is, just hit learn and step on your hi-hat pedal and it will automatically come up here. You can invert the hi-hat controller signal, meaning if your pedal is all the way down and your hi-hat sounds open, or if your pedal is all the way up and your hi-hat sounds closed, you can reverse that right here. Then you have the auto foot splash function. If you're using an electronic kit and you want to trigger a foot splash sound, when you stamp your foot down and then raise your foot up really quickly, you can click that on and off and that will make that happen. This knob controls the sensitivity of that, means how easy or hard it is to actually trigger that sound, and then this controls the volume of the foot splash. Over here we have some controls to fine tune the opening and closing of the hi-hat. This meter represents where the hi-hat controller position is presently, open to closed, and you're able to set it up so you get a very tightly closed sound when the pedal is all the way down at the bottom, and just a regular closed sound when it's down about here. And then you can sort of adjust where all that lands depending on how your hi-hat controller functions. And that's about it for the setup panel. I'd like to note that there's also choke sounds for each of the crash cymbals and the splash cymbal and China cymbal. And there are several in between open and closed hi-hat sounds right here, as well as tip and edge sounds for tight and closed. All right, moving on to the final panel, we have grooves. Now on Robot Dog drums, this isn't your traditional grooves library or grooves browser. It's something I call groove starters, and it is just a few really basic starters or like building blocks of grooves that kind of gets all the mundane stuff of programming a drum beat, the eighth notes on hi-hat or ride cymbal, and then kicks on 1s and 3s, and snares on 2s and 4s, and adding some ghost notes in, stuff like that. So it kind of forces you to be more creative. You have to program your own drum beats, but it helps make the most tedious part of the process go a little quicker. So let's listen to the first groove starter. It's right here. You have some options there. You can change the leading articulation from hi-hat to ride to floor tom. You can add in ghost notes on snare right here. And you can kick every 4 bars off with a crash cymbal. Once you're ready to import that into your DAW, you just click in this outline box, drag and drop. There it is. And as I said, you can open it up and then you can customize your beat from there. Start off with the kick drum, make it match your bass line. And so on and so forth. Then we have these other basic fills built in. There's a fast one. There's a 16th note groove. An 8th triplet groove. And a train beat. This is nice to have in there. And if you want to continually play any of these in a loop, say to audition different drums, hit play and loop. And then one thing I forgot to mention is you can raise or lower the velocity overall of the groove right here. So in the same vein, we have fill starters here. They're very simple and you can expand upon them or combine them together to make different things. And then, of course, the big flam fill right here. Awesome. Well, I think that wraps it up. That didn't take long at all. I think I'm going to leave you with a track from the band Sad Turtle. Let's go back to the kit page. We'll pull up Clean Fusion preset. I got it right up here. And let's have a listen. Hey, enjoy Robot Dog Drums. Thank you so much to everyone that's bought it so far and all the comments and all the feedback. It means so much to me. I'll see you next time. Cheers.